Lucy, we're here, Substack living.
Yeah, my first
What
one.
are we going to do? Oh,
It's my first one, which is apologies to anybody who was
it's
actually.
only my number third. My number three, my number third. Yes,
Uh, that's why we were slightly late because
yes.
we had some technical difficulties, but we're here.
Mhm.
So I think our grand plan, correct me if I'm wrong, is to have a little bit of a chat about deep democracy because
Mhm.
Theresa and I attended a level 1 Lewis Deep Democracy training last week. And there's various things that we're excited by, maybe a bit confused by. So, as I understand our vague plan, we,
It's very big.
we will see where we go. But to have a quick chat about what deep democracy is for anybody who hasn't heard of it. I'd heard of it at a very superficial level. Now I have a slightly better understanding of what it is. And then explore a couple of the concepts in it that are maybe a little bit different from some of the other things that other methods use. And maybe if we have time, we might get people a bit excited about some other books that it reminded us of, or some other methods that I'm like, ooh, it's a bit like this. So somewhere in building a map of where this fits in the overall landscape of things that we can do as facilitators and ways that we can improve, particularly on the concept of how we work with conflict and why we should work.
Mhm.
Does that sound roughly right?
That sounds roughly right. Yes, and the timing is actually quite interesting. So, I mean, part of the reason for me I joined Substack relatively recently, and part of that is because I benefit from what I call learning out loud. So, having conversations with people, specifically around things that I've just read about or learned about, allows me to imprint it differently and better. And that's why I'm doing a lot of writing on
Yeah.
Substack. So, this is helping me kind of process the learning with somebody else who was there because we were in it
Yeah.
last Thursday and Friday, but we haven't actually necessarily stepped back. And I know we have a call with the other people soon around that. Um, but the other thing is, I recently had two requests come up from corporate clients. One was a book on conflict.
Ooh, which one?
Um, well, so we've gone around and around on different topics. And actually, one of the best books that I've recently read on it's not around conflict, but it's around how to have conversations is The Next Conversation by Jeffrey Fisher. It's just very practical.
Uh-huh.
So I suggested that one. We've talked also about high conflict and some other books, but that one I just feel like is really practical. And then I had another request from a group of senior leaders who are struggling with making decisions.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, okay, there's the conflict and then there's decision, which is exactly what deep democracy is about.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do we want to go into the history of deep democracy? A little bit of context?
I think we can maybe at least tell people roughly what it is and then where it came from in
Yeah.
our limited understanding, because I think the very but the word deep in deep democracy is doing a lot of work.
Yes.
I feel like well, a warning to everybody listening is that we will be skimming over like very high level understanding of something that like was quite a experience. Um, but yeah, do you want to start?
Sure.
And I'll,
I can start and you can fill in the gaps. Okay. So, from my understanding, deep democracy arose post apartheid South Africa when a large company brought in three psychologists to support them, like with how do we get these people, our employees, to work together now when we are coming out of a situation where certain people were in certain positions of authority because of apartheid, or certain power structures have now shifted. How do we actually get people to work together? So one of them was Arnold Mindell, and then Myrna Lewis, and the other one I think was Greg Lewis, maybe
yeah.
Greg somebody. Anyways, so they created this, and then since then it has evolved a little bit, and Myrna Lewis has now kind of Deep Democracy 2.0. So the original one was kind of Arnold Mindell's work. And now what we learned is what's called Lewis Deep Democracy.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of shifting behavior patterns and relationships of conflict between people
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and making decisions.
I think so. And what I would add to that is I think it has as a central premise that if you actually want to deepen relationships, make decisions that last, quite often you have to go a lot deeper than we typically go in the types of conversations that we have.
Yes.
And there's this concept of like an iceberg, and this is a very central metaphor to deep democracy. And we talk about the fact that a lot of the conversations that we have in groups and organizations are what we call above the waterline. They're the part of the iceberg that we can see. They're very rational, they're very logical. But I think anybody who's ever been in a group setting probably has had the experience of like the fact that when you stay in that realm, particularly when the decision is important, you end up cycling or like spinning your wheels quite often. And there's clearly something that's going on for the group that isn't visible or, in deep democracy terms, conscious to the group. So in deep democracy, we talk about conscious and unconscious in a kind of group setting. And the definitions of those things are: conscious is like known to everybody in the group, and unconscious is if there is anybody in the group who does not have access to that information or insight, then that is treated as an unconscious topic. And yeah, I think we could spend the entire I'm talking just about the iceberg, but
yeah.
The final thing that I think is important, particularly given the way the world is going at the moment, is I think the motivation, and I think the quite profound insight from this is we're seeing a lot of places in the world where there are these kind of majority votes like referendum or elections where increasingly there's this 51-49 split. And that is it's so common nowadays that basically you end up in this win-lose situation where the majority decision is taken and you basically just don't accept the perspective of 49% of the people, which means that you lose access to the wisdom of those 49%, and they end up disenfranchised. And then they end up showing all kinds of resistance, which I think is one of the other topics that we're probably going to end up talking about.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I want to add to this, which kind of touched on me, is, I've been doing for the last, I don't know how long, but doing a lot of personal development work. And over that time, I realized a lot of unconscious things within me. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about this consciousness and unconsciousness of the group, so if there's a group of 10 of us, we have 10 things that are conscious within us, 10 people with consciousness. Like those are things that are conscious to us, but then we're not sharing with the group. So it's unconscious to the group. But then we have all the unconscious within us, which is also contributing to the unconscious of the group. So it's just like makes it exponentially more difficult. Oh. And I think for me, that's one of the powers of, my experience at Deep Democracy and the training is there were things that came up from inside me that I did not realize were that I was not even conscious of. Yeah, through the methodologies. And that's part of what we can get at. And because the above the iceberg is all the conscious, rational things, but there's a lot of emotional things that are also below the surface. And I was taught to, I was always told I was too sensitive.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I've been taught to push down those emotions. And so sometimes we don't realize the emotional level underneath some of our positions, right? Why we're for or against something. So that's something that I think is also really important.
I 100% relate to that. I was like, oh, wow, I'm like really learning some stuff about myself. And like, I'm like, where is this coming from? And I wonder if that's a good like transition to the topic, like one of the central topics, like, or concepts of the method, which is the resistance line.
Yes.
And I stupidly don't have a picture of the resistance line in front of me. But
I might have one in my book, my notebook. I don't know if it's going to be very clear, but
yeah,
I can.
just going to polish my camera.
It's my scribbles.
Yeah.
Um,
I can maybe while you find it. There we go. Beautiful. Do you want to have a stab at explaining what it is? So it's
yeah.
the resistance line, also sometimes called the terrorist line. Interestingly,
Yes.
it actually really like as a name, but we should probably explain
Yes.
where that's coming from.
So they call it the resistance line because it's more palatable, I think.
Uh-huh.
Where the terrorist line is like, whoa. But at the core of this is when this resistance line goes from the more covert side of things to the more overt side of things. It turns into behavior that we could very easily label as terrorism.
Uh-huh.
So, um, so essentially, the resistance line is a way of showing how the voices of dissent or that minority will show up over time and resist the majority decision that was made.
Uh-huh.
And maybe it's not even a decision, maybe it's just a reality
Uh-huh.
that exists. So it starts with jokes and sarcasm. And I think we were all like, well, what's the difference between jokes and sarcasm? And I think that that's interesting to look at. Where is a joke, and where is a sarcasm, sarcasm? And so the example that I gave was conversations that I have with my siblings in a WhatsApp chat is often quite joking, but it's actually showing our resistance to things that are happening potentially at a larger familial level
Uh-huh.
or kind of with, other things in the world. So we make kind of jokes, but that's actually showing our discomfort
Uh-huh.
and our resistance to what's happening.
Uh-huh.
So,
So we go jokes and sarcasm. What comes next?
Next is excuses.
Excuses. Uh-huh.
Okay. So the example I gave as well is of my daughter saying she's motion sick, which I don't think she actually is motion sick. She just doesn't really like to travel. She doesn't like to go places. I think that there's an anxiety behind that. And I don't really know. Maybe she has motion sick, but to me, I'm like, oh, that's an excuse because you don't want to go somewhere.
Uh-huh.
Right? She just likes being home,
Yeah.
safe. Right.
Relatable.
Yeah. And then, and one of the things also is that the excuses that repeat, not just one excuse, but like when it repeats again and again and again, then you're like, okay, what's deeper here? What are you actually resisting?
Uh-huh.
Then the fourth aspect is gossip and lobbying. And this was an interesting thing because we were a multinational group. Gossip is pretty clear to someone, but some people who English was not their first language were like, well, what is lobbying? So what does lobbying mean to you, Lucy?
Lobbying to me is, in this context, kind of advocating maybe behind the scenes for a particular stance.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not behind the scenes, maybe it's overt as well, and it's kind of in the middle of the line, right? So I guess it can be covert or overt, but like trying to make other people see your point of view. I'm guessing it comes from a place of feeling like you're losing a battle that's important to you. And so you're like trying to, make the case for your points. Maybe behind closed doors, maybe in private Slack channels, maybe. And so like this, these things kind of spread and percolate through group or an organization. What does it mean to you?
Same thing. So, and by the way, Kevin, thanks for joining us. So to me, I can give you a personal example. So when I worked for a not so great boss, the other people who also did not think she was a not so great boss, we would gossip together. And it was kind of like we were lobbying people to our position and on our side. So it wasn't just like venting, like, oh, I would just need to vent about this negative experience that I had with her. It was like this attempt to coalesce against her. So we created this us, her dynamic.
Yeah.
And we were all lobbying each other to like go against her.
Yeah.
Essentially, is how it
That's
was.
good, because I think it kind of comes to like trying to build some power, right? You're trying to build strength in numbers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So nice.
And for those of you who are listening or watching, let us know in the comments if you are recognizing any of these on any of these behaviors on the resistance line. So the next part of the resistance line is they put it as communication breakdown,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I'd add this like sense of avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the examples they gave is when you decide to text somebody as opposed to actually picking up the phone and calling them.
Mm.
Like, you should call them. It's going to work so much better if you actually have a conversation, but you choose to text them anyways, even though like you choose ease and convenience over the discomfort that could arise from a live conversation.
I get that example, but I'm also a millennial, so I'm just like just like ringing somebody cold is I'm like, I can't.
Yes. Okay.
Like
Yeah.
warn them. Anyway, side note. Yeah.
It's true. I do think that it is true. There is definitely a cultural aspect of it. But I know in myself, there are times where I'm texting someone and I know I should really probably call them.
Yeah.
Or there's times where I know, when I've said, hey, I think it would be good for us to talk about this. And then I get their text and I'm like,
But I think that's maybe a good example of cycling, right? Like, so that's kind of one of my things, which is like when messages go back and forth a few times and you're not actually moving forwards, like that's an example of what you're cycling.
Yeah.
And that's probably be on a call with somebody.
Yeah.
So I've probably made the point for people.
Yeah. So cycling is when you just kind of keep repeating the same thing in different ways again and again, and you're not really getting deep into what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have jokes, sarcasm, excuses, gossip and lobbying, communication breakdown and avoidance. And then we have going slow and disruption.
Yeah. This is a fun one. So it might be interesting to people to know that we did this training as a group of facilitators who know each other quite well. Like lots of us knew each other quite well. And I think it's actually quite rare. This is coming to a confession because I realized something about myself about how I'm basically like how I can be like a nightmare participant. And so, we were all in some capacity professional facilitators and have, I think it's fairly safe to say, relatively strong opinions about how some things should be done. And there were a couple of times during training where things were not done the way that we were either expecting or hoping, or like we just weren't clear and we felt a bit lost. And I, at one point, had a massive reaction to the way that something was being done, and I just totally disengaged from the conversation. I couldn't. I would be like, if we're going to do it like that, then I'm just like, I can't do it that way. And I just kind of leant back, and I was like, so I think that's an example of this kind of dissociating, and ironically, that was one of the examples that we ended up working with, which was like, okay, there's clearly a dynamic here going on where you as a group are not happy with something that is happening in the room right now. So, provoke a group of facilitators who don't normally get a chance to be participants very often, and you'll end up with some quite interesting group dynamics, I think.
Yeah. Hats off to our facilitators, I will say. And that was a really challenging group. Yeah. So, I mean, I think when people are leaning back, when people are leaning out, when people are checking out, people are not engaging, that's a sign that definitely there is some sort of conflict, potentially unspoken, potentially spoken. And maybe they've already spoken to it already and you're not really aware, but that's something for us to look at, like what's really going on. Again, what do we need to go fishing around? That was a term that we talked a lot about.
Should we explain it?
How about let's finish that, and then we'll talk about that later. Yeah. So the next one is strike. And as someone who lives in France, I am very well aware of striking. Actually, while we were in Berlin, there was a massive strike where the agricultural workers and farmers drove their tractors through like a large section of kind of where we live, purposely blocking the road and purposely making it really, really challenging for anyone to get anywhere. And they chose to come like right to the center. So where I live, there's like one town where pretty much all the office buildings are. And they did it at a time that would prevent everybody from going to work or dropping off their children at school and all of that. So they were definitely, and I don't even know, I know a little bit about what it's about, but they were definitely, that was their resistance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think we're probably coming towards the end of the resistance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last one is war and separation.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a conversation that we had around, are they the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
What did you take from that? Are they the same thing or not?
Yeah, I think I haven't fully, like the dust hasn't fully settled on that. I think, separation sounds very passive, which is why I think I'm struggling to unite them as the same thing in my head. And war is like the most extreme uh, type of resistance there can be, and that's why it's at the end of the resistance line. So yeah, I don't think that's fully landed. I think the idea behind it is that you've come to the idea that there is an irreconcilable difference that you don't think you can recover from.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that context, you've kind of lost all hope and disengaged from the process for that reason. So I can understand it as the end of the scale for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
You understand that?
Well, to me, I also struggle with that because I don't see them as the same thing either. But the examples that we were talked about that they gave in the group was specifically around people divorcing, like relationship separation. And is that necessarily? And that I think in some cases there is a divorce or separation where it's like you never speak together again because you recognize that every time you come together, there is a war, right? Not really a war, but like a metaphorical war between you. So you're choosing separation over that. But there are cases where you divorce someone and you separate as a couple, but you actually can still remain friends. And that is not the same thing.
Yeah.
At a like geopolitical level, I'm not exactly sure how those can be the same thing unless you would think of like a civil war in a country and they decide to create two countries from it. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I mean, I think that's definitely a sticky point for me. Yeah, around that. So, yeah. So that's the resistance line. I'm going to quickly go through it again for anyone who's joined. So we have jokes, sarcasm, excuses, gossip and lobbying, communication breakdown avoidance, going slow and disruption, striking, and then war and separation. So all of those are ways that people, specifically minority views, show their resistance to the current reality, the current situation. So this could be within a work context. So you're part of a team and you all decide you're going to go this way and take this strategy and work on this project. And then you, as a team lead, notice these things creeping in. To me, that's your opportunity to slow down and figure out what's underneath this resistance before it gets to war, separation, people quitting, big fights, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think what I would add to that is like maybe we should talk a bit about like the why. So I think it's quite a useful tool from two perspectives. One is that when you're on the far left of the resistance line and you're seeing the kind of early behaviors, it's theoretically easier to intervene at that point because the resistance hasn't got that deep. And the second reason that I like it as a tool is that, particularly with the alternative name, so sometimes it's called the resistance line, sometimes it's called the terrorist line. I think there is this concept this idea that is very central to deep democracy, that everybody has the capacity to go along that line. And the example that I gave earlier, where I was just like, I was the one who was like disengaging. I was like probably about halfway along that line. So that was my tiny, tiny terrorist in me. So it wasn't a full on mutiny because we managed to get it back. But that, in terms of helping people to understand that there aren't good people and bad people, there are just roles, and everybody has the capacity to show resistance along that spectrum in some sense. And in different situations, we will probably all have a flavor of showing some of these behaviors, and that tells us something about what's important to us. And if we want to make decisions that stick and endure, then we probably need to work out how to dig into what's going on for people.
Yeah. And this is where this idea of good conflict comes in. And that word good conflict came up a lot for me. Good conflict versus a silent war. And so what I have looking at my notes, it says good conflict works better than simple dialogue. So we learned a couple of tools for how to go fishing, which is engaging in good conflict. And one of the things that at the end, we did this thing where we had to look at different poles of an idea. I'm going to show another little picture of my notes. I don't know if you can see that. So in the work that we did, we learned two different types of what they call going fishing, which is like looking at what's the emotional stuff that's going on below the surface that nobody's seeing. And in both of those methodologies, or those practices or exercises, we purposely pulled the two poles, the two kind of opposing views, apart. And if you notice, if you look at this picture, if you pull the two poles apart, what happens to the fish?
It comes out the water.
Yeah.
You can see it.
You can see it. So what was that like for you when we did that? What's the importance of it? Maybe not what's like for you, but how do you see that working in your work?
So I really there were various things that I really liked about the methodology, and some things that I found challenging. But I think we were guilty of this as a group as well. I think a lot of groups are just quite polite to each other, and while they are continuing to be polite, and while even us, we are some of the most versed in psychological safety, we felt quite safe with each other as a group, and we were still being super, super polite to each other, rather than necessarily always talking about what we needed. And deep democracy uses various tools to make that a bit more provocative, so that people can actually say what they need. So it's just more direct. And sometimes more visual as well. So maybe, do you want to talk about the debate? Because I think that's kind of a nice method where you can actually really physically see.
Yeah. So one of the things that came up on the very first day was the facilitators got a sense that we were not speaking up. We were being too polite. And so we did one exercise called the soft shoe shuffle with the theme of voice. And that's essentially, that exercise is somebody spoke up something. And so I shared, I'm not speaking as often as I would like, as I feel compelled to do, because I'm holding back because I'm worried that I'm taking up too much space. So I made that comment. And then other people who felt the same way would come near me. So they'd have the same opinion, but then they wouldn't necessarily, then you could choose how far away. And so we continued doing that. Different people shared different things about their experience with their voice in the group. And from that, the facilitators noticed two polarities. One, I'm not sharing my voice because it's an internal thing. I'm kind of self-silencing. And then the other one is the facilitator issue, or an external issue that's causing the silence. And so we put those at two different poles. And what we did is we stood up with an imaginary line in the middle. And we had a debate. So whoever had the most people started first. And what was great about this line is you could cross over the line. So if anybody said something that you resonated with, kind of like the soft shoe shuffle, you could move over to one side. So we started all with one side, and then we went all to the other side, and then we went to back and forth. So everybody got a chance to say their piece. And some people shared things from both perspectives. And I think I did. I don't know if you did. But and then in the end, it brought up a lot of, the emotional things that were going on. And there was things, again, that were unconscious within individuals that they didn't realize came up until they heard somebody else speak or until they actually spent time with it. And so it was a great way to fluidly have a debate and to really see what's really going on here. And then use that information, that new information that was uncovered, to make decisions about what we were going to do next. Like, how are we going to actually use our voice well so we could get the most out of the situation? What did the facilitators potentially need to change? What did we potentially need to do internally?
Yeah.
Do you want to add to that?
I would just add two things. I think, I think the fact that the facilitators were even willing to be like, is it you or is it us? Like, like that's kind of one of the points of deep democracy, right? Like you feel what the tension is and you lean into it and go straight where the difficult conversation is, because I think that built that kind of trust in the first place. And then I think the thing that's important to mention about the debates is the word debate is interesting because we have an association with what we think of when we think of debate. And in the way that like traditional debating is done, there is a winner and there is a loser. There's the group that convinces the most people wins, and the other one loses. And that's not the point of this. The point of this is to get more information. So there is no winner and there is no loser. And as you said, many people can argue things from both sides. So you get a lot more nuance to the conversation. So I just think that's, a very interesting concept. And maybe as ways to wrap up, because I know we want to talk a little bit about books, but I'm curious about which parts of these methods you might end up using in your work, because I can imagine using this debate in mine.
So it's interesting because I feel so, and I want to, before I say that, one thing to follow up with the debate is it doesn't end with the debate. Then there's this like internal time that people take. What insights did you get in that sharing? So it's not just debate and everybody goes home and votes. There's more to it than that. So at first when I was like, I don't know if I'm going to use this because I work pretty much 99% virtually. And I was like, there's not a way to do it virtually. But actually since then, I'm like, there is a possible way that I could do parts of it. Maybe I could do kind of the soft shoe shuffle and I could do other bits of it. But I think that I work with a lot of organizations that struggle with making what they consider good decisions and really getting all the voices heard. So I'm now at a point where I'm like, yeah, I love books, but maybe there's like this new aspect of my facilitation that's going to come forth from my training in deep democracy. Because I think at one point I tried to call myself a conflict resolution coach and I was totally unprepared to actually do it. And now I feel like this is needed more than ever. So I can see myself kind of adding this in to what I already do. Yeah. What about for you?
I think lots of parts of it. I think just leaning into the topic of conflict explicitly. There's another methodology I'm trying to avoid, like just being like, and there's this method and this is method. But I think one of the ones that is very important and central is this concept of spreading the no. So, I think quite often and slowing things down. So I think it was a very good experience in seeing how fast consensus goes quite often in a group. So like the facilitators helped us see, as a group of relatively seasoned facilitators, how fast we were getting to something that was on the surface of things a consensus, but wasn't necessarily a true representation
Mm-hmm.
of the best possible outcome for that group. And spreading the no is this idea that when somebody is brave enough to speak up with some kind of dissenting voice, you pause and you ask, does anybody else feel anything like this? Even a little bit, like as a way of creating this psychological safety and understanding truly what the
Mm-hmm.
representation of that feeling are in the room. And so
Yep.
that's probably the easiest. It works online, it works offline.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
I think to add to that, this idea that we need to get all the views, but we don't have to get all the voices.
yes.
And I think that's a really important aspect of it. And then it also connects to me with a little bit of the work of Amy Edmondson. Not necessarily the whole concept of psychological safety, but she has something called the voice and silence model or framework. I'm not sure what it's called, but she talks about the difference between productive voice and unproductive voice, and productive silence and unproductive silence. And
Uh-huh.
this gets into psychological safety, because when you're not psychologically safe and you are silent, that is very unproductive to the group. And
Yeah.
that ties in a lot to this idea of deep democracy. So you are unsafe and unwilling, and then oftentimes people get a false sense of, oh, they're on board because they didn't dissent, they didn't say their no, but they didn't say their no because they don't feel safe saying their no. So deep democracy creates a space for people to say their no in a safe way. And one of the things, the concept of spreading the no, is so that it doesn't fall on one person. Because then again, this us them dynamic, oh, they're the one holding us back because, you know, so that spreading of the no also gets in the gray area, that it's not just yes, this or that. There's a lot of nuance and gray area in between.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think a lot of people joined at the last minute.
At the last minute. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for messing. We messed up the start a little bit because the original link didn't work, so we were a tiny bit late starting. But
Yes.
this is recorded, right, Theresa? So
Yes, it is recorded. And it's open for anyone to watch later.
yeah, brilliant. But we're very happy that you joined us.
Yes. So quick question. Are you going on? So we did level 1 training. Are you going on to do level 2?
I would love to do all of the levels. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what. So like, there's level 2 conflict, and then there's like self-awareness. I can't remember which order they're in. But yes, certainly the topic of conflict in general. I've been toying for a while with actually training as a mediator. So a mediator, a conflict coach, like whichever one of these I'm trying to decide which one I gravitate towards most. But I think certainly this is relevant irrespective of whether I stay as a facilitator or go down the mediation line. And yeah, I think it's very relevant, and I would encourage other people to look into it from the perspective of um, as facilitators, I think it's very easy to get yourself in above your head. Or it's very, no, actually, it's my experience of conflict in groups is that it's very easy to just put a lid on it. Like there's all kinds of ways, like if you know how group dynamics work, it's quite easy to be like, avoid the route to escalation. And this, I think, is great from the perspective of just like slowing down to speed up. Like you slow down the conversation, you work out what's actually going on, so that later the group can be a lot more effective and work a lot faster. So yes, is the short.
Okay.
What about you?
Okay. I'm a big fan, super big fan. And and again, I think if everybody just did level 1 training, how different things could be.
The
It's
world.
not that expensive, right? The world would be totally different if we all just did level 1, but I'm definitely looking to do more. I think group dynamics are I mean, there's the interconnection between the psychology, the individual, and the sociology of the group that I think is really imperative whenever you're working with others, which is what we do all the time. So I'm definitely a big fan. So thank you, Lucy, for joining me. This was
Thank
so much
you.
fun. There's so much more we could have
So,
unpacked, and we could maybe do a level 2. But I think we got a little bit of nuggets. If people have questions about um, more about it, you can look it up online. You can ask Lucy or I about it. But um, and I'm writing a little bit this week around my experience in deep democracy in conjunction with the book. So you can also check that out. And I know Lucy's done a post on her facilitation mindsets as well about it. So
just it. Yeah, a very shallow post about a very deep topic. So,
yes. Thank you, Lucy. Thanks for everyone who watching, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.